शीतला सस्यश्यामला मातरम् वन्दे मातरम् शुभ्रज्योत्स्ना पुलकितयामिनी पुल्लकुसुमित द्रुमदलशोभिनी सुहासिनी सुमधुरभाषिणी सुखदां वरदां मातरम् वन्दे मातरम् वन्दे मातरम्.
Okay, good morning students. In the last class, we learned about cellular respiration. In the cellular respiration, the final product ATP means energy, carbon dioxide, water. Okay. Today we are going to learn about how this ATP work in our body. How this ATP work in our body. ATP means adenosine triphosphate. It is stored energy. When we are doing some of the daily activities, this ATP will release energy. This ATP release energy. With that energy, we are doing some of the works in our day-to-day life. But when we are doing some of the vigorous activities like running, exercise, too much of walking, during that time, what are the reactions that takes place in our body? Do you know one thing? The stored energy in our body, within 2 seconds, it will be complete. When we are doing work, the stored energy within the 2 seconds, this will be complete. Yeah. But when we are doing vigorous exercise, too much of walking, running, during that time, what will happen in our muscles? For our muscle activities, we need energy. That energy we are using with this ATP. Is it right? But what I told you, the stored energy, it will be complete within 2 seconds. Within 2 seconds. But when we are doing continuous exercise, for example, this is cell. In the cell, there is a respiration process. When it is oxygen available to the glucose, aerobic respiration takes place. Then energy is released. That energy is stored in the form of ATP. So, this ATP, it will be complete within 2 seconds. When we are doing work, it will be complete within 2 seconds. But when we are doing exercise or walking or running, during that time, have you seen their position? When they are running, they are not taking oxygen. Like that. They are not taking oxygen. But when they are not taking oxygen, but inside the cell, means inside the muscle, the deficiency takes place. What deficiency? the oxygen deficiency takes place. So when the oxygen deficiency takes place, without the oxygen, the cell will do the respiration process. That respiration process is called anaerobic respiration. What is that? Anaerobic respiration. When the anaerobic respiration takes place, inside our body muscle cells will release lactic acid. What is that? Lactic acid. Why? Because while they are doing exercise, while they are doing walking or running, they are not taking oxygen. So that's the reason inside the cell there is a deficiency takes place. What is the deficiency? The deficiency is called oxygen deficiency. When the oxygen deficiency takes place inside the cell will do the process of respiration. That respiration is called anaerobic respiration. అంటే ఆక్సిజన్ లేని సమక్షంలో కూడా ఈ గ్లూకోజ్ రెస్పిరేషన్ ప్రాసెస్ కి గురవుతుంది. ఆ రెస్పిరేషన్ మనం ఏమంటాం? anaerobic respiration అంటాం. But when the anaerobic respiration takes place inside the cell, that time what type of chemical is released? That is called lactic acid. What is this? Lactic acid. So that's the reason after completion of their exercise or walking or running, they feel muscle pain. They feel muscle pain. What is the reason for muscle pain? When the anaerobic respiration takes place inside our cells, the cells will release lactic acid. When the lactic acid accumulates in the muscle will get pain. The muscle will get pain because of lactic acid. It means in our body, both aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration, both are takes place. When the sufficient oxygen is available to our body cells will do the process of aerobic respiration. So in the aerobic respiration, the high energy is released. The energy quality is high. But sometimes, if our cells will not get sufficient amount of oxygen, the cells will do the process of anaerobic respiration. When the anaerobic respiration takes place, the final product is lactic acid. Energy also released, but that is very little amount of energy. So when the lactic acid accumulates in our muscles, we feel pain. So that's the reason after completion of running, they will sit somewhere. Then what they are doing? They are taking more oxygen. See what they are doing? They are taking more oxygen. Is it right? Why? Because there is an oxygen deficiency takes place in the muscle. So that's the reason they are taking power respiration. They are taking power respiration of completion of their exercise or their running. So when they are taking oxygen into our body, sufficient amount of oxygen when it is entered into the cells, again this lactic acid is converted as a glucose. Do you understand what I am telling? Without oxygen, this glucose is converted as a lactic acid in the muscle. But after completion of exercise or running, when we are taking too much of oxygen into our body, so the sufficient oxygen when it is available to the cells, again this lactic acid is converted as a glucose. Okay, so actually when the oxygen is available, this glucose again it is converted as a carbon dioxide, water and energy. Then when the lactic acid converted as a glucose, our muscle pains also slowly going to be decreased. our muscle pains also slowly going to be decrease. Okay now. So here, if you see the graph, this is timeline. This is formation of lactic acid. When we are doing 10 minutes, nearly 10 minutes of exercise, see the formation of lactic acid, it goes up. Okay. After 10 minutes, it means our work complete. After our work means running or walking, exercise, whatever it may be, it complete. Then the lactic acid goes down. It means it converted as a glucose. Why? Because after 9 minutes, the sufficient amount of oxygen is entered into the cell. So this lactic acid converted as a glucose. It means the lactic acid goes down. But when the lactic acid high in our body muscles, we will get body pains, means muscle pains. Okay now? So that's the reason when we play cricket or some other games, we feel body pains. Is it right? Reason, the lactic acid is accumulate in the muscle. That is the reason. So actually the stored energy within the 2 seconds it will be completed. But if the sufficient amount of oxygen is available, so automatically oxygen is entered into the cells, the respiration process, aerobic respiration takes place, the energy is released, so the released amount of stored in the ATP, that ATP is we are using. But when it is breaks of the oxygen, if sufficient amount of oxygen is not available, the formation of ATP stop. Means the sufficient amount of energy is not available in our cell. So that's the reason this glucose is converted as a lactic acid. But when it is converted as when a sufficient amount of oxygen is again it available to the cell, again this lactic acid is converted as a glucose. Okay now, this is the process. Sometimes why we get pain means this is the reason. Sufficient amount of oxygen is not available to our body cells, means muscle cells. In the muscle cells, during that time, in the muscle cells, there is a respiration. That respiration is called anaerobic respiration. When the anaerobic respiration takes place in the muscle, there is a acid that is called lactic acid. Because of this lactic acid, we feel pain. All living organisms are doing aerobic respiration when the oxygen available takes place in their body cells. Is it right? Already we know. All living organisms, they will do the process of aerobic respiration in the presence of oxygen. So when the oxygen is available to the cell will go for oxidization process. The cell will do the process of oxidization and releasing energy. What are they? CO2, energy, water. These are the end products. When the oxygen is available to the glucose. When the oxygen is available to the glucose will go for oxidization process and releasing energy, carbon dioxide, water. Not only human beings, in all the living organisms, they will do this process when oxygen is available. This respiration is called aerobic respiration. But sometimes, when the oxygen deficiency takes place in our body, that also we saw. When the oxygen deficiency takes place in our body just release lactic acid. What is that? Lactic acid. not only in human beings, some of the unicellular animals also will do the anaerobic respiration. When they are not having sufficient amount of oxygen in their cells, means unicellular means single cell animals, like bacteria, paramecium, amoeba, like that. They are called unicellular animals. In the unicellular animals also will do the anaerobic respiration. But through this topic, what we want to learn? Through this topic, what we want to learn? In the process of anaerobic respiration, whether heat is released, carbon dioxide is released or not, we will see. We will see. In the process of anaerobic respiration, what type of end products are released? In the process of anaerobic respiration, what type of end products are released by the yeast cells, means unicellular animals. Already we saw in the multicellular animals. But now here, in the unicellular animals, if the oxygen deficiency takes place, in that time, these unicellular animals, what they will do, what type of materials are released. So for that, we will do one experiment. What is this experiment? Anaerobic respiration. What type of living organisms we are using here? Yeast cells. What is that? Yeast cells. Yeast cells we are using. That is also one type of living organism, single cell animals. So these yeast cells, by this anaerobic respiration, what are the materials released? Whether carbon dioxide released or not, heat energy released or not. So what type of process will do these yeast cells in the absence of oxygen? We will do an experiment. So shall we do it? Now we will see the experiment of anaerobic respiration in yeast cells. So what are the reactions that takes place while the anaerobic respiration doing by the yeast cells? Now we will see through this experiment. So first, we have to take one thermal flask. So in that we have to take glucose solution. What is that? Glucose solution or sugar solution. This is glucose solution. So when we are taking glucose solution, that glucose solution, it should not have oxygen. It means ఈ గ్లూకోజ్ సొల్యూషన్లో ఆక్సిజన్ లేకుండా చూడాలి ఎందుకంటే ఇందులో వేయగానే ఆటోమేటిక్గా ఈ గ్లూకోజ్ సొల్యూషన్లో ఆక్సిజన్ ఉంటుంది. బట్ వాట్ వీఆర్ డూయింగ్, వాట్ టైప్ ఆఫ్ ఎక్స్పెరిమెంట్ వీఆర్ డూయింగ్? anaerobic respiration means in the absence of oxygen, yeast cells, what they will do? That experiment we are doing. So that's the reason in the glucose solution, completely the oxygen should be disaster. Means the oxygen availability, it should not be here in this glucose solution. So that's the reason. What we have to do when we are taking glucose solution, this glucose solution, it should be heated. When we are giving heat to this glucose solution, in the glucose solution, oxygen is evaporate. It go out. So still we have doubt whether oxygen is there or not in the glucose solution. So for that we have to do a small test. What is that? What is that? So actually the solution is blue in color. Blue in color. Okay. So in the solution, if you add genus green B solution or diazine. What is that? Diazine. Anyone, not two, anyone. If you add to this glucose solution, if the glucose solution turn the blue color into pink color, we will confirm there is no oxygen or the less amount of oxygen is present in the glucose solution. But if nothing change, if it is remain blue color, you can find out still oxygen is present in the glucose solution. So then when after testing, then we confirm there is no oxygen in the glucose solution. Immediately we have to add yeast cells to this glucose solution. Immediately we have to add yeast cells to this glucose solution. Yeast cells to this glucose solution. Then when we add yeast cells to this glucose solution, again the air should not be entered into this glucose solution. So that's the reason. Immediately we have to pour the paraffin solution on the top of the glucose solution. Paraffin solution. So basically చెప్పాలంటే అది కొవ్వొత్తు మనం కరిగించగా వచ్చినటువంటి లిక్విడ్ ఏదైతే ఉంటుందో ఆ టైప్ లో ఉంటుందన్నమాట పారాఫిన్ అంటే. So when we keep the paraffin on this glucose solution, the air should not be entered into this glucose solution. It means now this solution completely anaerobic condition, means absence of oxygen. So in the absence of oxygen, yeast cells, what they will do? They will do the process of anaerobic respiration. They will do the process of anaerobic respiration. Is it right or not? Yes. So after keep the paraffin solution on this glucose solution, immediately we have to put one 2-hole rubber strapper. 2-hole rubber strapper on the flask, front portion of the flask. We have to keep it on that. Then from this one hole we have to arrange thermometer into this glucose solution. From this one hole we have to arrange thermometer, and the next hole, from this next hole we have to arrange U-tube glass rod. U-shaped glass rod we have to arrange. One channel we have to keep inside the flask, and another side we have to take one test tube or bowl. In the test tube or bowl we have to keep lime water or bicarbonate solution. What is that? Bicarbonate solution. The lime water is also called as bicarbonate solution. So in that, and another channel we have to keep in the test tube. So when we arrange this total operators, don't shake it, don't touch it until 24 hours. In between we have to measure for every 2 hours we have to measure the temperature in the thermometer. Okay now? So after 24 hours what we have to observe? After 24 hours what we have to observe? So after 24 hours if you observe, the thermometer temperature increases. The thermometer temperature increases. And also, if you see the live water, the live water is turned into the milky white. The live water is turned into the milky white. Why? What is the reason for turn this live water into milky white? How it takes place? Okay, so this live water, because of this, why? Because when the carbon dioxide is entered into this live water, the live water is turned into the milky white. It means here there is a respiration process takes place with the help of these yeast cells in the absence of oxygen. That is called anaerobic respiration. So in the anaerobic respiration, when it takes place by the yeast cells, little amount of energy is released. It means the heat energy is released as well as the carbon dioxide also released. How can we confirm? Because the bicarbonate solution is turned into the milky white. So that's the reason we confirmed during the process of anaerobic respiration, little amount of heat energy released as well as carbon dioxide also released. But what about this sugar solution? In the absence of oxygen, yeast cells convert this glucose into ethanol or alcohol. Do you know this process? This process is known as fermentation. What is this? Fermentation. So that's the reason. Anaerobic respiration is also called as fermentation. Okay, actually, when the ethanol or alcohol form in this glucose solution, how they separate? How can we separate this ethanol from the glucose solution? For that there is a process. That process name is called as fractional distillation. Fractional distillation. From the petroleum, so many products are taken out. How they are taken out? By this process only. What is that? Fractional distillation. From the petroleum, petrol, coal, tar. Is it right? So many products that comes out. The same process we have to use to take out ethanol from the glucose solution in the heat of 70 degrees centigrade. So, what we call this process? Fractional distillation. In Telugu we have to say Amsika Svedanamu. So actually, this fermentation process already we learned in the 8th class. Is it right or not? When we prepared dough, idli dough or dosa dough, so when we prepared dough, when we prepared that day, there is nothing change we didn't find out in that. We did not find out any change in the dough when we prepared that day. But if you observe next day, the dough, it increases in size, means it bulges. It bulges. What is the reason? Inside the dough, there are some microorganisms. The microorganisms are doing the process. That process name is called fermentation. In the dough, the microorganisms, in the absence of oxygen, they will do the respiration process. That respiration is called anaerobic respiration or fermentation. What do we call? Fermentation. So this fermentation process may be used in bakeries. Bakeries means preparing cakes. Is it right? Different types of food items. When they are preparing, in that, This fermentation process they are using. And also beer industry, beer పరిశ్రమల్లో beer industry means rum, whiskey, gin, all the alcohols, how they are produced by the process of fermentation. Okay, so this fermentation process we are using in our day-to-day life. Okay, thank you.